Welcome back, everybody. I'm Tassie with Shaman Memoirs, and this is my podcast series. Thank you so much for everybody who has been tuning in this whole past year since I started doing and getting more into my podcast style videos. I've heard tons and tons of great feedback, and I've had a lot of great people reach out to me interested in coming on. And one of those great people that I do have today, it is Mudang Mi. She is a Korean shaman. So welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, Tassie. I'm super excited to be here. I am an officiated Mudang, which is a Korean shaman priest up here in Washington State in the United States. And if anyone is interested in trying to find me online, across the board is kind of easy. Like my main brand, I guess you could say, is the Mudang. So it's pretty easy to find me, but otherwise my website is actually firelightlotus.com. And I'm kind of everywhere online, like Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So you guys could probably find me pretty easily. But thank you for having me. I'm super excited today. Thank you, Tassie.
I am so excited to have you on. And, you are actually the mudang that I always tell people in my videos, like, yeah, there's a mudang that I follow. But then it's funny because your name, it is the mudang. So I'm like, so I feel like I'm giving misinformation when people ask me, what's your name? Like, what is your tag? And I'm like, I swear this isn't right, but why do I keep seeing the mudang? So yes, and I am super super excited to have you on. There's also a lot of viewers who are also very interested in other types of shamans too. Like it's not just Hmong people, and I've been trying to tell everybody this. Hmong people are not the only ones with shamans. So many cultures have it. So I really, really want to get into everything about you. But first, I do want to let everyone know I have also had services with the Mudang. And so I highly recommend her, you guys. I had a really, really good clarity session with her and just feeling her guides and her gods. It felt really, really good. So I am just so stoked that you are also going to be on here. But now let's get into your history. Like, tell me about like how it started for you and your experiences.
Yeah, it's been such a long time. Like looking back, right, when I was really little, 5, 6, whatever years old, I was always playing with spirits. But the main thing that really started my journey essentially was around when I was about 10 years old. We were raised very casually Christian, and every Korean diaspora and probably adoptee out in the States knows like a lot of our families go to Korean churches for the community a lot of the times. It's not just faith centered. So, we were raised with going to church every once in a while, and primarily being Christian. But around when I was about 10 years old is when I started looking into other religions and traditions because, I think everybody can probably resonate, but at a certain point when you know that there's a spirituality or practice that doesn't resonate with you, you don't feel anything. Like it feels very like empty. So I noticed that if I was reading the Bible or trying to pray, like my hominy, my grandmother, who was very Christian, told me to, I didn't really feel anything. I didn't hear anything. Like, my heart just, it was still. And not in the way for contentment or anything. It was still in the matter of emptiness. And so from that point, I started looking into other traditions and religions, and I distinctly remember looking to see if Korea had an indigenous practice at all. And all I could find back then, that was like, remember, y'all, this is like 2000, okay? I tried looking it up, and back then, all that I could find was about Buddhism. And the one wiki or whatever article I did find about Korean shamanism, I literally went down like the first couple sentences and it said, this is a indigenous religion that one would have to be initiated into and trained for years into, and I clicked away. I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound for me. That doesn't sound like it's my thing. That sounds like a lot of dedication and work. And so I clicked away from that. And since then, it's just been a lot of different. I mean, I've been in the like witchcraft and pagan communities since that time. So it's been a really long time. And I've gathered so much different like practices and knowledge from different paths of like just different practices of witchcraft and different spiritualities. For a few years, I was a very casual worshiper of Aphrodite, and she actually helped a lot with getting my self-confidence up and just, being okay with my own body. Because back then, growing up as pretty much the only Asian in a small rural town,
Yeah.
there was definitely instances where it like got to my confidence, right? So
Mhm.
Aphrodite helped a lot with that. And then after that, I got into Kemetic Orthodoxy, which is, I think they're governmentally recognized now as a revivalist religion for ancient Egypt. And so with ancient Egyptian gods called Neteru, they like when I connected with them, it was very, very different, right? Like it felt like my heart was filled with sunlight. Um,
Aw.
really amazing. Like I love them so much. But then after and all these years, I have had a very just a very sure confidence or belief in my purpose, right? That I was meant to do something that was very aligned with like priest work or clergy, like taking care of shrines.
Yeah.
That's always been with me. And so in Kemetic Orthodoxy, I was actually working up towards becoming clergy within that. And Shinbyung really started kicking in. Like I've always had it as a, and so for those who don't know, Shinbyung is
I was gonna ask you.
yeah, it's spirit sickness in Korea. Um, and others might know it better as shamanic illness.
Mhm.
So it's always been like the symptoms have always been with me. Premonition dreams have always happened since I was little. In middle school, it started off as like how do I explain? It's like it felt like electricity running down my spine and my shoulders and my neck. And I've had that for a long time, but doctors never figured it out what the reason was. Like, I've never had any kind of nerve damage or anything like that to have those kind of symptoms.
Mhm.
So, because it wasn't causing like extreme level of pain, they're always like, well, I mean, if it doesn't bother you too much, then whatever.
Yeah, don't
Um,
worry about it. But it's funny
exactly.
because as you're saying that, I know exactly what you're talking about. That feeling.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like, I've had those symptoms for a long time, but then after I want to say in my 20s, um, it started getting really, really bad where
Ah.
it felt like the electric shocks going down. It did start hurting a lot. And so, but it would happen so suddenly. There was no external or internal trigger that I could figure out.
Mhm.
Doctors couldn't figure it out. Anyways, but when it would happen, it would startle me so much. I would have to keep myself from like shouting aloud. And
Oh, yeah.
and then at that point too was when my premonition dreams came true. I started hearing gongs in my by my ears. And I would have like really, really intense vertigo. I'd have to hold on to something to keep myself from falling over. And
Mhm.
this does not run in my family. Like
Yeah.
so do not.
And like what you're explaining, it sounds a lot like what they call moning in for Hmong people in shamanism, and it basically just means it's an ailment and it's due to the spirit guides or due to being a shaman, and that's really very. It sounds very similar to what we experience as well. So yeah, so you had your Virgo. And what did you do from there? Because you were on your way to be this Egyptian priest, right? So
Yeah, it was a very weird turn. So, I being in a lot of the spiritual and pagan communities, I was like, I just kept brushing these symptoms off. I was like, everybody probably experiences this stuff, whatever. And I just kept living life. But then the dreams started coming in. When these symptoms got worse, I started having dreams of my ancestors coming to visit me. And the first one I remember was very explicit because it was several of my ancestors. They came in through like the door, and it was a surprise visit, and I was just like, I'm so sorry. Like, if I knew you guys were coming, I would have like cooked you guys some food and had meals prepared and da da
Oh,
da.
you're so
And
nice. I would have been like, it's a ghost, run away.
I didn't know any of those rules yet, right? So I'm just like, come on in, everybody. And I had, I was very apologetic, not having meals ready. And they're just like, oh, don't worry, you're going to be offering us like offerings later. So it's okay right now. And I was like, in my brain, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But when I woke up, I noticed the specific terminology there. And I was like, what were they talking about? But so they came in and they had a huge bundle of stuff. And they're like, hey, we brought you these things from Korea. And they unfurled the bag, and it was, I didn't know this at the time, right? So remember, like, I knew basically nothing about Mugyo, Korean shamanism. So they unfurled the bag, and in it were like sacred tools that mudangs often use. There were like fans, swords, um, like certain ceremonial garb and different things. And I was just like, oh, this is a lot. Like, I can't possibly accept all this, So I was just like, I can't have all this. And they're like, no, no, no. They push it back towards me. They're like, you have to have it. And of course, it's going back and forth, that whole Asian cultural thing, right? Where you're just like, no,
Yeah.
no, no, no,
Let me pay the bill. No, I'll pay the bill.
exactly. And I pushed it back towards them again. I was like, no, really, it's just too much. Like, I couldn't ask for this. And they pushed it back towards me, and they're like, very firmly this time, they're like, no, you have to have these. You can't say no. And I was like, oh, okay. This suddenly became 0 to 100. Like, I thought we were just going back and forth. So then I woke up and I looked into it because I was like, before that point, I never really remember my dreams unless it was like, I call them movie dreams. So they're very vivid, and they're very like, either your astral self is doing some kind of stuff in the spirit world, or like your subconscious working through the day, right? So before that, I never had dreams that were so vivid, so striking, that I remembered really easily still right after waking up.
Mhm.
And so I looked into it, and I was like, so mudang items. What the heck is this? I ignored it.
I mean, like, I feel like back then, even with these signs, you're kind of like, oh, whatever. Like, if something is meant to happen, it will happen. Kind of yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And I was just like, I don't know what to do with this. So I just kept practicing as I was. I was trying to, at that time, I was still really heavily focused on purposefully and intentfully connecting to my heritage, right?
Mhm.
And however I can in that way. So like Korean folk magic, and not necessarily Korean shamanism in the way that mudangs do things, right?
Mhm.
So anyways, I shrugged it off. And then a little bit after that, probably, I want to say maybe a few months after that, I had another dream. And it was my harmony, my grandmother, taking me up a mountain in Korea. And we went past like a very like old sacred tree that everybody stopped and prayed to, left offerings at, lit incense and all that good stuff. And then we went up further, stopped at like this abandoned looking cabin, like a really small abandoned looking cabin. There was a man in there, elderly man, that was essentially bedridden. And the harmony was like, you have to do a ritual to help him get better. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know anything. And she's just like, don't worry, I'll tell you and show you how. So I was like, okay. And so we did our thing. And then we continued back up the mountain. As we were traveling, she pointed to basically the other side of the mountain, and she was like, There's a really famous big Buddhist temple there. I'll show you next time we go. And I was like, okay. And then before we get to the very top, she points to the top and she's just like, you have to do kut up there. And I was just like, kut is a grand ceremony in Korean.
Uh-huh.
And I was just like, oh, okay. Like, you know, whatever. And so I wake up and I ask my mom. So my mom is native Korean. She's still fluent in Korean. And I asked her about it because when I woke up, I remember vaguely that the name of the mountain was Yongmunsan. And I asked her, like, do you know anything about this mountain? Like, I Googled it really quick and it looks like these things are there. And she was just like, I vaguely recall that, but let me ask around. So she was asking around the Korean community up here,
Yeah.
and she found out that there is a 1,000-year-old sacred tree on that mountain. There is a huge famous Buddhist temple on that mountain. And that mountain is very famous for mudangs going to it to do ceremonies.
Oh my
After
God.
that, I was like, okay, I get it now.
Okay, I won't deny this now. Like the chances that you would dream and know of those exact things. But you know what though? I can still see it like, I don't know about this. There's still that doubt that lives in all of us, where you're just like, what if it's just a coincidence? So, like, what did you do after that, knowing that, you were visited by your ancestors, you had this dream?
Yeah, and
Did you
like,
take it seriously now?
yeah, took a while. It took a while. Because, when you see something very general description, like, yeah, you're going to have to be vetted, be initiated, go through ceremony, and da-da-da-da. And it's very like, maybe it's me being raised American, but I was very like, no, I don't think I could vibe with that. That seems difficult.
Okay, so let me get this clear. You were adopted?
No.
Oh no. Okay.
I was born in Korea. I lived there for like a handful of years, and then because my dad is half Korean and in the army, we moved out to the States.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so then you were raised in the States though.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So then you ended up going to Korea to get initiated?
I actually ended up finding a hyper-traditional elder out here in the States and did the ceremony.
Okay, because I was gonna say, like, how, like, okay, because I have no knowledge of this. So, there are kind of like how for Hmong people, for for Hmong shamanism, your teacher can live here or like in Thailand or China. There's also Hmong shamans in Australia and France. So even Canada. So, like a lot of times their teacher, they look for them, and Hmong people, they ask around for shamans, they go and meet the shamans, pay their respects, and try to do a test to see if they're compatible to be a teacher, right? And so if that is their teacher, nowadays there are virtual sessions where the Hmong shaman teacher can raise them virtually, or like for my lineage, we have to go and actually see and help raise our students in person. So is that what it's like too for, like for your religion? And I'm sorry, let me correct myself, for the Mudang, what you guys do in America? Like, you don't have to go to Korea, right? Or
No,
do you?
so okay. It depends on how much you're willing to spend, essentially. It's very budget minded. So that's why I opted for mine to still just be held in the States.
Mhm.
My spirit mother's reasoning was also that I was raised American, so I'm American. Like she even
Yeah.
said it. She's like, "You're American. You're not really Korean." And so that's why we ended up still doing it in the States, which is possible because, and I'm sure and you've probably dealt with this yourself, right? Dealing with the spirits of the local land, you still have to pay respects. You still have to be like, hi, we're here for this reason. Can you please give my deities access through you from Korea so we can do what we need to do? And usually they're very, very okay with it.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of the acknowledgement, right? But, so that's why it's still possible wherever
Uh-huh.
you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like like I know of people who have teachers that are in Thailand and they actually don't fly their teachers back and forth. Their teachers will do it virtually where they are. But like it's one of those things where I always tell people spirit is spirit. Like because there was beliefs in the Hmong community for way back when I was younger in the early 90s, where a lot of people they believe that Hmong shamans can only do services for Hmong people, and so it was just obviously they didn't know. So, but that was something that I was always taught. It's not true that you can do services for people even if they're not Hmong, right? And because for me, I always believe spirit is spirit. You can always touch it if it's spiritual. It doesn't matter the distance, or if they are here or not. But I didn't know that you guys have such a connection to like the earth and the ground like that. For my knowledge, for Hmong shamanism, a lot of our connections, it's going to be with our spirits and our ancestors. So regardless of where you go, if it's in they always say it's like your dawn cha, which is basically like your skin and bones. So if you come from their blood, that they can always find you, they can always reach you, because whether you are a mix, if you're half Hmong, half Korean, it's still who you are. So yeah, so I did not know that you guys had such a connection to the earth, the way Native Americans do a lot of practices too.
Yeah, it is very interconnected, interwoven. I mean, like you mentioned, with some of those elders being able to do their rituals and ceremonies or what have you, like virtually, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we have hyper traditional lineages. Not a lot of them do this, but there are plenty of instances where hyper traditional elders in Korea will video record and over video call,
Yeah.
perform the ceremony for someone, just because it's like everybody has the funds to constantly fly back and forth,
Yeah.
in order to get it done.
Yeah. That is 100% true. That is so true. But wow, that's nice that they offer the virtual video calls. Because like I know even when I watch my own students virtually, because they live in a different state, sometimes when the spirits are too excited, the call like disconnects for a bit before it comes back on. Yeah, and I'm like, I need y'all to move out of the way so I can see what they're doing. But for me, I'm watching them just do a regular practice, not an actual ceremony. It's just a regular practice. And then like during the new year for Hmong shamans, we do a whole like release of our spirit guides. They go off for the new year celebrations. And a lot of my students virtually, they want to do like a video. So, because then the ones who live here, they get to all come and see me perform it. So then the ones who do not live here, they feel like they're getting cheated and they want to see it on video. But I'm like, trust me, the video is probably going to get cut out halfway. But no, that is so awesome. And with like the time differences too, like to be able to work, you're obviously if you were in America, you would have to work with their time difference. And even if it means it's 5 in the morning, you're up at 5 in the morning to watch the ceremony. Okay. So I also wanted to ask you, your spirit mother. What is considered a spirit mother to you guys?
So for us, a spirit mother is someone who actually performs the 신내림굿, the initiation ceremony for the apprentice.
Okay.
It's not someone who helps convey information or training. It's the person who actually performs the ceremony for you.
Oh, so then is your spirit mother kind of like with you for life, like along your journey, or is it just they only specialize in the initiation of students and then that's kind of it?
No, so actually it depends Because each mudang can have different gods in their pantheon, which impact what they can do for their community or whoever. So, not every mudang is going to be able to perform initiation ceremonies. Like that's something.
Oh.
It's a very particular kind of ceremony that can be really rough on a person's like physical and spiritual body.
Hmm.
But you know, she she was the one who performed it for me, so I am connected with her emotionally. That's like a, if you consider the initiation ceremony like almost like a marriage vow to your gods first off, and then also as like a way of being spiritually adopted by the spirit mother. uh,
Okay.
Essentially her responsibility after that point to take care of you spiritually, and make sure you're not doing anything that is a taboo against the heavens, the etiquette and all that stuff. So we keep that connection for life, even if you fall out of talking with them for a while or just because life happens. And that connection and bond is not necessarily severed until you go through that process with a different spirit mother.
Oh, it's kind of like, so would you say it's what we call our shaman teacher, like our sifus? Would you say that
Yeah.
it's kind of like that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because they don't like for okay, every lineage is different. Kind of like just for you guys, right? With different gods that you guys work with. But like for us, we have shaman teachers where in my lineage, my teacher doesn't teach me what my spirit guides do in place. Like when I go into the spirit world, my teacher's not standing there coaching me through what to do, right? I know that there's a lot of what's it called? Like guided meditations. I think that's the right term I'm looking for. So there's a lot of guided meditations out there. My teacher never guided me in meditations. She yelled at me from the outside. But she's never like told me I need to go and do this now and tell them to do this and make sure you do this and this needs to be done. But what they do sometimes is they sit there and watch you and listen to your chants so that they know where you are in your journey to ensure you're going correctly. And then in turn, I do the same to my own students where I don't give them guided meditations. I always kind of grill them after they're done. What did you go learn today? Because I need to make sure that their spirit guides are taking them correctly. So but for a teacher for monk shamanism, we do go and we filter their spirit guides to make sure that they are clean. And because sometimes you're going to have ones that like to tell a lot of lies or like sometimes they exaggerate things. So a lot of times we have to filter those out, and we make sure that if our students are married or if they're not married, that there's the hardships that may be impacting their decisions and their emotions. We have to make sure that they are stable, because if they are not stable as a person, they will really struggle with taking care of their own spirit guides and making their own decisions. So I feel like we do that, and then we have that connection. Kind of like whenever I go and I do ceremonies for people in the past, I have this connection with them, like because I had to go into the spirit world and chase their spirits and heal them and everything. So it seems like your spirit mother is what we would call a teacher, right?
Yeah, that's very, very similar to how we do things as well, just because, you know, with my students, I always encourage like their gods need to be able to, like you mentioned, like guide them correctly, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the masquerading spirits are really, really strong types of spirits that obviously masquerade can act like they're ones that
Love.
accepted,
Yeah.
and just basically take over. And when that happens, things will start going really downhill. And you
Yes.
basically have to start over from the ground zero. It's like if a invasive plant kind of gets rooted, you have to basically dig deep down into the earth, take it
Yep.
all out. So we call that hoju. And
Totally.
yeah, so like with my students, I'm very similar in that the training is more fluid. It's not going to be anything where I'm like, hey, so this week you guys should work on da da da. It's very much based on what their own gods, their own pantheon, wants them to kind of focus on and move along with. But I'm
Hmm.
also there as extra support to make sure that in the mundane level of the world, they know what they're supposed to do too.
Yeah. I love how you said the masquerading ones. That was so beautiful when you said that. I was like, oh my God, like light bulb. Like you are absolutely correct. We call them zongning. So, a lot of times when raising of a new shaman, even if they had a previous teacher, we always go in and clear them all out. Because you are correct. But yeah, one thing I have noticed, and I wanted to ask you this. When you refer to gods, I notice that you use that term the way I use the term spirit guides. So I really wanted to ask you about that. So is that how you guys, is it because of the Korean term that you guys call it gods? Is it called simding or something like that? Or simin? Oh, oh, what?
신령님.
Oh, okay, thank you. Because I was like, why do I see this S word here? I was like, I don't know what this S word means. Because in Hmong we call them Kwanang,
Mm.
but that literally means like Kwa. When we say the term Kwa, it means guess.
Oh.
And so, and then Nang is the term that we use for a shaman. You are Wanang or Dunia Nang, like that is a shaman. So when we say Kwa Nang, it means guess of shamanism. So, but in the English, when we are translated into English, we call them spirit guides, right? So, but I just noticed that you call them gods. So is it because of the Korean term, or do you guys actually call them gods?
There is like that translation first off, and then for me, especially because I know how American audiences and spiritual communities tend to read things and what will make it make sense for them, I added
Yeah.
basically another layer of translation. But honestly, Shin does mean like God. So Shin Young
Ah,
Nim is like God plural. And then for me, using that term in English, it's the Korean gods. It's just so specific to like each person. But generally, so during the initiation ceremony, we accept like celestial heavenly deities, like actual deities, and then we also go through the process of deifying our ancestors. And so they essentially become gods as well through that process and are capable of doing God things.
I love that because that's what we do too.
There's so many similarities, I swear.
I know. Isn't it so crazy though? Because I gotta tell you, I have so many clients that come to me that are not Hmong, and they either they don't know or they struggle finding that community, or it's just not as practiced anymore for their ethnicity where they don't have shamans. But here's the kicker, they're all struggling with shamanic ailments. They have everything exactly like shamans. They can see the future, they can see ghosts, they can read auras, they can all sorts of things, but they really struggle in getting initiated. They really struggle in finding that community. But I think it's so amazing how no matter the great divide, a lot of the practices are very similar.
It
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really wild. Like even in certain like African traditional religions, there's certain things that are also similar. So like
Mhm.
Haitian voodoo, how their hierarchy is in a house, essentially, I found is fairly similar to how we do things too, with essentially that elder or head of the house being the one to really do the ceremonies that open your head in order to accept the spirits you need to accept. And just the process or procedurals that everybody has to kind of walk through.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's so amazing. Like how when you were talking about, and as you're talking and explaining things about the Mudang path and everything, my spirit guides are showing me the picture and the images, and I'm like, oh my God, but that's like what we do. So it is this hilarious conversation that I'm having in my head. Because then when you were talking about like bringing down the celestial ones and then also your ancestor deities, and I was like, that's just like Hmong people.
It's us, it's us.
Wow. Yeah. So like, I mean, I know we totally went off on a super long tangent. Sorry to everybody for trying to follow along. So let's take it all back now that you've answered all my burning questions. Okay, so you had your dream now, and your mother confirmed about the mountain. And
Mhm.
then what happened from there?
So after that, we reached out to a few different elder mudangs out in Korea.
Hmm.
So of course, because I'm not fluent, but my mom is, so she helped essentially communicate by calling them while I was there. And it was just so funny because it's like some of them didn't even need to hear any of my complaints or anything. They just took down my birthday and like my birth time and stuff, and they're just like, "Yeah, Singi, you have the fate. Like you have Shinbyung. You have to go through Shinnerimgut. Like you have to become a Muda."
Oh,
And and it's just crazy because like going through multiple weddings is really I would say like sobering because oh, this is for real now. This is really it. And what was funny too is because like my mom has always been skeptic, right? Um, she's just naturally that kind of way. She's never been overly faith-based as a person. And after we got off those phone calls, she was like, you know, if this is what you want to do, I'll support you. But you know, you could just see like maybe a therapist. And I was like, I'm already seeing a therapist. This is not helping me. Like,
oh
oh
my
my,
God.
doctors are not doing anything. Therapists are not doing anything. Like,
But you know what though? Kudos to her because I feel like that is such a normal reaction for a lot of raising shamans. Like we definitely, I find that the family is always wanting to support them, but at the same time, they are more inclined that maybe you just ate a lot and you had a crazy dream. Maybe you're watching too many movies.
yeah, it's just like,
I would say, and it's so funny because having gone through it myself, not in that sense. Like, my family was super supportive, but I feel like we as an individual, we deny it more than anybody else first.
yes,
Okay. We are the ones who go through it the most, where you held it internally for so long before you even dared to like maybe it's real, like and so I do find that by the time we finally tell somebody else, like somebody who we think is gonna be able to do something, be able to take care of it, right? They are now just getting the information and they are processing what we did a while back, right?
yeah. Like, it's
Which
because
is
we were all
hilarious.
for so long to process.
Yeah. So I do find that eventually people they do come around once they have more knowledge and more information. But one thing I think my mom taught me that a lot because my mom, like we learned really quickly not to say anything to her just because we knew her reaction. It's kind of like you are predicting their response, right?
Yeah.
So, but then something inside of me just told me I had to tell her. So it was just one of those scenarios. And then her reaction was the same. Okay, it was the same. However, she was like, it was like a duck sitting on water, and her mind, which was her feet, the duck's feet under the water. It was going crazy. It was going crazy. So you had the therapy talk with your mom.
Yep.
Now, Was it really your mom though who really helped support you and get you into the right connections?
Yeah, she did help, like she still helps, finding certain resources for me, like companies that are nearby that can deliver rice cakes, which is like a pretty important staple offerings for us. She still helps me a lot because, again, I'm barely conversational in my Korean, if that. But she's fluent, so I'm just like, Ma, like, can you help me? I'll send her some money. Yeah, so like at that point, I told her about everything I was going through by then, right? Because she was just like, why are we doing this suddenly? Besides that one dream that she was pretty shook about. Like, she's just like, how do you know this? I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Like, we never went to any mountains or anything. We didn't study mountains in Korea while I was growing up to 5 years old there, So it's not even like subliminal messages from my subconscious at all. And so she was pretty shocked about that. But I told her about everything I was going through, and she was just like, "Wow, you've been really going through a lot." And I'm like, I don't know, maybe. But after that point was kind of, it turned up a notch, right? So my Shinbyung actually started getting worse after that. After getting that
Oh.
confirmation, to the point where it felt like a hand was like squeezing or gripping my heart and my lungs. And one time I was driving along, it was a super long stretch of road going to work. And at that time, I worked at a job that, I'd be driving at like 5 in the morning. So it's still really dark out. And that area is really prevalently known for deer being in that area. So
Oh.
while I was driving, suddenly, like, a very like a film of what seemed like static slide across my vision. My eyes were open. I'm blinking. I'm driving, and I could not see. Like, past the static, I couldn't see anything. So I was
Yeah.
freaking out. It was a solid 30 seconds of that, and I was very worried. After it went away, I was like, "What the? What was that?" And I was freaking out. And I told my mom. I was just like, "Hey, this is getting kind of crazy now. Like, this is
Yeah.
getting worrisome. I don't like." I went to the eye doctor, perfectly healthy eyes, maybe a tiny little bit of astigmatism, but
Welcome
nothing
to
to be
my
worried,
life.
nothing to be worried about with my eyes, with my heart, my lungs. Like, I checked out as a healthy young woman.
Mhm.
Um, so by that point, I actually ended up finding the spirit mother, and going through the spirit sister, who was my main translator, help for that kind of contact. I told her about the updates with my symptoms, and we're like, okay, well, it seems like it's going to be time for you to get your initiation ceremony done.
Yeah.
So from that point, I knew that I had to get it scheduled on the books. And from there, I had to save up the money in order to send it, right? Because everything costs
Oh
money.
yeah. Mhm.
So, I had to send a certain amount in order to get like my sacred items, my shrine items, my ceremonial garb, and all that stuff.
Yeah. Wow. That is such an amazing journey, and it's so funny how thinking back on your story there, uh, before I became a shaman, I've always been very drawn to Greek and Egyptian,
Hmm.
like their gods and their stories. So, and it's so funny because even now I could go back and read up into it, but my spirit guides never really allowed me to look into like Buddhism for some
Hmm.
very interesting reason. Taoism, anything like that, they've never allowed me to look into it. But when it came to Greek mythology or learning about the Egyptian gods and their whole culture and everything like that, they've always been enthralled and they've always allowed me. So I thought it was so interesting that you also went down a very
Yeah,
similar
I don't
path.
know. It's just something about them. Greek gods, I found, have been, how do I say without being offensive? They have a lot of like human-like emotions and reactions to certain things.
Ah,
And
yes.
anybody can tell that from reading their stories about
Yes.
them. Egyptian gods are just very, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of openness that is not really prevalent in Korean history. That the way, like just the way that they handled sexuality and all that stuff, I personally felt like that was really freeing, you know? I thought that was cool.
You know, hearing you talk about this, it actually just reminded me about in the Hmong stories, um, our original Hmong king, he also was in Korea.
Mm.
And but I remember too, there's a story about how for Hmong people there it started with two brothers. One went north and one went south. And the one who went south, it became the Hmong people in China. And then the one who went up north, they stayed in Norway. So then it's the indigenous people in Denmark and Norway.
Oh, wow.
And yes, and during the Christianity takeover, a lot of them fled and settled in Minnesota. So that's why my office, the block that it's on, it used to be owned by a company known as the Sons of Norway. And I remember because another shaman came to my office and he actually educated me on a lot of this. And he knew of a lot of Hmong shamans as well. And he's also a shaman for, I don't want to say it. I'm going to put the word here in editing because I'm gonna butcher the name. Um, Simeon? But anyways,
Later?
what?
Later?
No, not Thader. Thader. But the King of Norway, he also grew up in this neighborhood. So it was just very interesting because in their culture, a lot of the shamans were gay or bi. And I know for Hmong shamans, the commenters will have to remind me, you guys, but I know that when we went into the battle there was two kings and our king fighting with China. And I remember that there was something that some of them went to Korea. So I'm kind of like, because my spirit guides keep reminding me of it right now. And I'm like, I don't know what you guys are talking about.
There's a link.
But they're saying that's why we are so connected. That's what they're trying to explain to me.
It
I'm like,
actually makes a lot of sense too, because I know in our history there's noted visitations from, who is it, like a princess from India or something like that, and so that's why there seems to be a lot of inspirations from India as well for us.
oh wow.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And you know what I found with so many Hmong shamans, we have different types of spirit guides. And some of them are heavily Chinese influence or Vietnamese influence. And some are even like French Mongolian influence. So, some are Korean influence as well. So I always tell people, you can tell which ones you have because they will really like something. When you think of like Bollywood, there are so many people who are absolutely in love with it. And some people love the Thai dramas and everything to do with their design and their styles and their gods, you know? And then there are others who are more drawn to like the Chinese style or the Korean style. So that's how you can tell which ones that you have more of an affinity to. So very, very interesting. So knowing now, like, having practice and everything and, coming across your whole path here, what did you find was the hardest part, especially of your raising? Like, did you find that it was like the logistics or was the logistics pretty easy for you? Because I know for like a lot of Hmong shamans, they struggle with the logistics. Like having a place to put their shrine, to be able to safely practice, having people who support them in their life before they can actually start this journey. And then, of course, finding a teacher.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty big too, but I guess I've been pretty lucky with the people in my life being accepting with my practicing of since before, even before Mugyo, just practice of spiritual things.
Yeah.
So the hardest thing about everything, honestly, was the initial jump into the ceremony, because flying out across the country, staying and being surrounded by basically complete strangers for like 5 days to do different parts of the ceremony all those days. That was definitely the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. I was jumping so much that when I came back, I had bruises all over my legs. That's how much I was jumping. It was pretty extraneous.
Yeah, I've heard about for mudangs, you guys mudangs, I'm sorry. You guys, your initiation is very intense and it goes on for days. And it's like long days. So yeah, that is pretty intense. Just I can't even imagine. Like, did you feel like what a lot of monk shamans go through, where leading up to the ceremony, they feel like they're going crazy?
Oh yeah, like it was very so before my ceremony, I was very heavily impacted by a lot of low spirits. And I'm sure you and some of your followers will acknowledge and remember probably experiencing this themselves. But when you're going through shamanic illness, you are essentially like a light in a fog, and ghosts will be attracted to you. So, going through that, and you don't really have a lot of protections from gods or anything before your ceremony. So you're kind of like an open buffet almost. And so I had a lot of attachments on me, and they were, because of my ancestry, they were heavily like mentally ill focused for this certain symptoms. So I was having a really, really, really hard time mentally. And I know in particular, there was a moment, I think in the middle of the ceremony, we were taking a break, and I had like a really strong attachment, like a low spirit snuck in behind. So how it was explained by my spirit mother was that the spirit, the note, like negative spirit, was hiding behind the deity I grabbed. And that's how they snuck.
Ah,
And but she could tell immediately, because there was like a cloud that just went over my face. I had a very dark expression, and she was like, what's wrong? And I told her, like, I don't know, I just feel like really cold, and I feel like a really, really strong urge to just get up and leave. Just take a flight back home. I
yeah.
don't feel like they're saying, like, I don't need any of this. I should just go back home.
Mhm.
And so my spirit mother touched my hands. She could tell her ice cold. I mean, it's like a air conditioned area. And yeah, I've been basically exercising in the extreme for myself. But I was staying pretty well hydrated throughout. She was letting me drink water throughout, as I needed and everything. So it wasn't, we knew it wasn't anything that was a physical or external factor. It was something spiritual. So my spirit mother took me back into the shrine and performed an exorcism. Right after that, my mind was clear-headed. I felt a lot better. And so I didn't suddenly anymore have that really strong urge to just run away.
Wow.
So it was such a strong, impactful moment that really, I mean, everything was really strong during the ceremony, like how I saw the gods, and like it was, it's still the same now, but back then it was so different to what I was used to, like the gods coming down and I could see them, like I could reach out and touch them.
Mhm.
And it was just very, very different. But so that moment though with the low spirit was really what made me understand, like, this can be very dangerous for people. Mm.
Yep. And you are 100% right. Like I'm always trying to warn people before your ceremony, it gets really bad. They will even have those moments of I need to cancel everything. I have to stop everything. This is all wrong. It's not going to work. Like you have to, these are your tests that you have to push through. And then I always tell people when you're doing a ceremony for healing, it takes time for you to fully see the full effect of it, right? But when it is a ceremony for a student, it's immediate. It is immediate. That is when you are going to see those differences right away, And so definitely your story there, it resonates so much because I know people who went through those kind of very similar things where you suddenly have this moment where you're like, no, I need to stop this. Even I had that moment on my ceremony day, in the middle of the ceremony, literally just I need to stop this. I'm ruining my life. Like that's literally how bad and intense that was. Now, with you having learned about like Hmong shamanism through, like your own research and everything, what do you think is the biggest difference between for Mudangs and then for Hmong shamans? What have you kind of learned that you think is very different? Or is there anything that you thought was very different?
I think the main difference is you guys using the bench and essentially traveling outwards, right?
Yeah.
For us, it's a lot of almost the reverse. Traditionally, it's the reverse. So instead of traveling outwards, it's more so traveling in. So we're bringing the heavens and the gods into us in order to do what we need to do. It's not sending our spirit out, but bringing everything in.
Oh, wow. Yeah, like I didn't even think about like, yeah, our tools are very different. Um Okay, I gotta tell you this because they're doing it right now. My spirit guides keep showing me flags. They keep pulling out flags. I'm like, stop it. What are you guys doing? Yeah, so like yeah, definitely the benches. I one thing that I absolutely love is your guys' outfits. Like what you guys wear. Like oh my God. Like but it's probably like because for some Hmong shamans they wear Hmong clothes every time they go and do a ceremony or practice even at home. They wear Hmong clothes. But then for my lineage, we can wear black clothes. And then during only certain ceremonies do we actually wear our Hmong clothes. And I'm not gonna lie, I hate sweating in my Hmong clothes.
That's awful.
Like these clothes are expensive. Like,
Yeah, and I feel like dry cleaning only does so much.
so I really, really don't like to sweat in my clothes, and they're nice clothes.
Yeah, it's just like I don't want to.
Oh yeah, and we wear veils that cover our faces.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yes. So every shaman, they have different lengths and different various colors. But then for mine, they like it a longer veil. So we do wear our veils too when we enter into the spirit world. And a lot of the veils, it has to do with a hiding of the shaman when they actually go into the spirit world and they're doing things that could be dangerous. You want to hide yourself, and that's why we wear our veils.
I think there's a similarity there too, actually, because certain lineages for us, traditional lineages, they wear like essentially I think it's called a hemp rope. And in between the hemp rope are like long, certain cut sacred paper. And then so it covers the face. And I think if any of you are familiar with my Instagram, you've probably seen me post a certain ceremonial garb a lot because she's one of my main active ones. But it's like black and pink, and there's like layers, like tasseled layers, and certain bits of the layers cover the eyes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because some shamans, they wear their caps like to just their nose so that they can breathe from down here, But my spirit guide is literally when I'm taking a deep breath, the cloth will be like,
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah, no, because then for some reason my spirit guides they like the longer cloth. Very, very interesting. Yeah, I absolutely love that. How was it with your family? Like what were their thoughts when you were gonna walk into this whole path?
My mom was, like I said, she was skeptical, but during the divination session or vetting session, essentially with who ended up being my spirit mother, she actually told my mom, like, I hear bells when you talk. So my mom actually had the calling first,
I was gonna
and she
say, did,
ignored
did
it.
this run in your family?
Yeah. So it actually started with my mom. It bounced to my little brother, and he's very not really religious either, or spiritual. And then it bounced to me because I was pretty much the only one that was ever open about spiritually practicing anything. Like for me, it was just I've always had a drawn to some kind of magical practice. Um, and it was really interesting. Um, Sorry, ADHD. I don't remember
No,
how
no,
we
no.
got
Just like, especially like your dad, like what was his reaction?
um my dad is he was an interesting person. He grew up very Christian because of his mom. Remember
Yeah.
my Christian harmony. So he was always casual when we moved up here to Washington. He never enforced like going to church every week or praying or anything like that. But
Mm-hmm.
when I told him about going into Mugyo and getting initiated, um,
Was he
and
scared for you?
for a little help financially because it was a
Oh, yeah.
lot. Um, but he was like, dude, this is a scam. Yeah, like he was like, this is a scam. Like, what are you doing? And I was like, okay, but Oma believes like this is something that can and possibly should happen, especially if that's what I feel drawn to do. And he's always been more of a skeptic with other things. So he was like, you can go do that, but I'm not necessarily going to go out of my way to help fund it, essentially, which is fine. Like we've always had that kind of relationship where I was very independent from his kind of help. So he was on the sidelines, like, hey, I love you, but
You're on your own.
you're doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah. That is hilarious. That is hilarious. Probably not in the moment, but I
Yeah,
mean,
no,
but
it
has
was a
has
little.
he come around where he's like, okay, maybe it's not to scare.
No, I kind of wish he did, but even now, like I'll send him update. Like we have a family like text group chat, right? And every once in a while, I'll send him like photos of what I've been up to, and it's usually got
Yeah.
something to do with my shrine or doing ceremony for people. And he'll like heart emoji it, but not necessarily respond. He's like, so
That
anyways, here's
is
the dog. I know you care about the dog.
oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Yeah, definitely. I found I have come to full circle. Like I think a big part for what a lot of Hmong shamans do deal with, it is the faith-based because the family is so involved.
Mm,
And I encourage family involvement with shamans because I always tell people it takes a village to raise a shaman. Like all of the different experiences and knowledge you're going to gain from everyone else. But you are going to run into instances where even shaman on shaman, a lot of shaman, it's kind of like, when it comes to shamanism, it can get tricky because they may not like the kind of shaman you are supposed to be. They want you to be a very specific style of shaman, and so they do run into that a lot. But for me, I've also run into that where I wasn't the certain shaman that they were looking for, like when it came to my family, like on my mom, like, because my mom is very used to certain types of shamans and she wanted that I be that type of shaman. And when I wasn't that type of shaman, it was more of like skepticism. But it's come into full circle, where it's gotten to where all those who probably did have skepticism, they've now come for services and they've come for help. So I feel like a lot of times when they start to see that, you are helping people and things are getting better, that they do come and ask you for help. I want to know, like, what advice would you offer, having lived through so many things now? Like, what is something that you wish you could have told yourself back then to really help any other, up and rising mudangs, or even for Hmong shamans, or anybody who wants to get into the spiritual space? What advice would you wish that you had known?
There's a lot of nuance to your own situation, y'all. So take it as you need to, right? Like, everybody's journey is going to be different. And so I even tell my students this, like, don't compare yourself and where you are to what they're doing and how far along they are. Like, your journey is your own. Our gods are very different from amongst each other, even. And so it's really important not to get caught up in what everyone else is doing. Like, what you're doing, as long as you have sincerity in your heart, earnestness to do better for yourself, your community, the people in general, like, just try to do your best every day. Like, that's really what you can focus on, and growth will naturally come, even if you don't want it. Like, it's going to come no matter what you do. So try not to focus too much on, like, oh, I need to look a certain way. I need my practice to look a certain way. Like, is that what your gods or your guides are telling you to do? Is that how they're guiding you to perform things or do things? If not, then why are you striving so hard to make it look that certain way, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
On top of that, recognize that there's different traditions and practices. There's hyper traditional lineages, and how they do things is very particular, especially like on our end. They have a very strict, rigorous style that most people are used to seeing. But that's not the only way that one needs to practice and be able to connect with nature spirits or God, mudangnim.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. But it's been so great having you on, just sharing your story and your knowledge with everybody. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys for listening to us talk and probably laugh too loud. But I appreciate y'all so much.
Until next time, everyone.